We are live with some massive breaking news. This is one of the most important moments in animal rights history. I can tell you that, having followed this for so long. Let me read it right off the screen from what PETA sent out minutes ago. A colossal win. Huge breaking news. The Oregon National Primate Research Center is going to negotiate the end of experiments on animals and become a sanctuary after an intense PETA campaign. This is absolutely massive, huge breaking news. And we're going to go to really the person who knows more about it than anybody else on the planet, Kathy Guillermo, Senior Vice President at PETA for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals. You've been fighting for this moment for decades. First of all, what was your emotional reaction when you heard this news?
You know, quite honestly, Jane, I was so relieved. This was an intense discussion that the board had, and there were so many Oregonians in favor of it, our 93,000 supporters there, and so many more. The state legislators wanted it, and it seemed to us that it should have been a slam dunk, but the Primate Center put up a pretty good fight about it. So I was just relieved that the board chose good science here.
But I mean, look, here's what I'm trying to even wrap my mind around. These are the animal experimenters, the people we've been yelling at for years, saying, stop this unnecessary torture of animals. It's medieval. And essentially they voted to do away with animal experimentation and turn their experimentation facility into an animal sanctuary.
I know it sounds crazy, doesn't it? But this is the board of directors that's responsible for the entire university. And what they voted specifically on today is to begin the negotiation with the National Institutes of Health toward that end. And I think it's a recognition of a number of things. I mean, obviously, there are people at the Primate Center who are not happy about this. But the board is looking at, this is what the future of science is. This is where NIH is going with its funding. This is what the public wants, and we have to pay attention. And I greatly respect that on the part of the board.
Well, yeah. My big question is, does this signal the end of animal experimentation? You have been fighting it personally. You've been on the front lines, Kathy. This has been your life for decades. I knew you 20 years ago when you were fighting this. And it seemed like no matter what, people kept cooking up these ridiculous, horrific experiments, chopping these animals up. We've had many examples, and we can go through it, and nothing that you said or PETA said or any other organization said really did anything. And now we have this sea change. Do you think it's the result of artificial intelligence showing everybody in the world that there's new ways of doing things, and also quantum processing that is really able to solve really complex problems and do massive analysis in seconds that would take even a regular computer years or many lifetimes?
You know, that's a huge part of it, a huge part, that we have the human-based methodologies now that can replace these animals. And I think this moment is it's a convergence of a number of things in history. First of all, we have a public that overwhelmingly opposes the use of animals in experiments for any reason. We have science that has brought about, as you point out, AI and other technologies that are proving to be superior to the use of animals. And we also have an acknowledgement on the part of the government for the first time in a very long time, that perhaps ever, that this needs to change. We also have evidence that experiments on animals simply aren't working. They're not getting us to where we want to be. And no matter what you say about these 7 national primate research centers, not you, Jane, but no matter what they say about themselves and all the good that they're doing, we don't see the vaccines. We don't see the cures. We don't see the treatments. We have no vaccine for Zika. We have no vaccine for tuberculosis, for HIV. They've all been failures. And so I think all of these things coming together have brought about this moment.
And there was a huge public outcry demanding closure of the labs. This and all the video we're showing is from PETA. Who are these people and what role did they play?
Well, these are some of our supporters in Oregon, and this is a photograph from earlier or later, I should say late last year, when there was testimony before the Oregon legislature. And these were Oregonians, some of whom are PETA staff, but most of whom are not. They're just people who live there who care about this issue. And they came out to say to legislators, we don't want this facility anymore. We are past this. This is not who we are.
So this, once again, I can't overemphasize it. This is a massive, historic, history-making win for animal rights. As people who are watching, great news. Let's make sure they do this move quickly. Absolutely. What about the fact that there are 6 other similar laboratories? This is the biggest facility. Maybe you could describe it a little bit, and then what the timeline is for transferring this horrific laboratory into a sanctuary for monkeys.
Yes, Oregon Health and Science University runs the Oregon National Primate Research Center. It is one of 7 taxpayer-funded, enormous monkey facilities that do experiments on animals, or specifically on monkeys, but on other animals as well. And it gets enormous federal funding. And what will happen now is that the university will probably appoint a committee. They will take input from various parties, including animal rights organizations and sanctuary specialists, and they will begin discussions with NIH. They have 180 days, 6 months, basically, to come up with a plan for transition. And then the board will need to look at that plan and vote on it again. But that's the timeline. And hopefully they can get it done before 6 months is over and we can get it going. But in the meantime, they must stop breeding these animals. They have about 5,000 monkeys in the Oregon Primate Center. It is the biggest, as you point out, in terms of the number of monkeys. So ending breeding right now, I mean, if they stop breeding monkeys right now, a rough estimate would be 600 monkeys that won't be born, because they kill in experiments about 12 or 1,300 a year. And then, of course, they replace those monkeys with other monkeys that they bring into the world.
Well, I'm so happy about this. I don't want to get too excited because, until it's done, but I am excited because I've covered PETA for 20 some years, fighting this in Puerto Rico, in Israel, in Hendry County, Florida, and now the fight is on in Bainbridge. And we just posted on Unchained TV a documentary entitled 30,000 Monkeys in Our Backyard, about the huge battle in Bainbridge, Georgia, that has united everybody of every ethnicity and political persuasion. They are all united in Bainbridge to stop a massive monkey breeding facility. You got to watch this documentary. It's really good. And it shows all these people coming together. And I'll never forget the guy who used to hate PETA. And he said, I never thought I would say this, but thank God for PETA. When this happened, they came in and they helped us organize. And so what's going to happen with that? Whereas it seems like the U.S. government is finally waking up and getting out of the medieval era and saying we don't need to do primate experimentation at the very least anymore. Why the hell would they need to do a massive breeding facility that has 30,000 monkeys?
I think it's so important to point out what you did, that the members of the community came together. They have come together. They're still fighting this battle. It's tied up in court right now because there is a lawsuit to try to stop it that the people who live in Bainbridge have brought. So that has prevented any building or any monkeys from being brought in. But I also want to point out that in Texas, PETA worked with residents in a county in Texas, and they did exactly the same thing. They came together. I mean, we worked with people who are cattle ranchers and people who are veterinarians for farmed animals, and we had this common ground, and we did stop the massive monkey facility that was going to house 20,000 monkeys in that county in Texas. So it can be done. And you're so right about where the federal government is going to. we know from our meetings with federal officials, we're very pleased to be able to present evidence to Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. about the failure of monkey experiments, the problems with these national primate research centers, and also the issues with importing monkeys to this country. And the government will never move fast enough to make us happy, but they are moving. They are making some change, and we're just so pleased to see the support for this now.
Now, we also covered you when you talked about tuberculosis. I believe it was tuberculosis, right? Being imported into the United States through monkeys, that they were lying and saying these were bred monkeys, but in fact, they were wild caught monkeys. That was a huge scandal. I know you had a big demonstration in Washington, D.C., where everybody was in hazmat outfits. I mean, that wasn't so long ago. I think that was like less than a year ago, and you were getting stonewalled. And now suddenly it's like the dam has burst.
It's very exciting to see. When Secretary Kennedy went on national television about a month ago, and he stated quite openly, we're looking at shutting down the importation of monkeys, and we would like to transition at least one primate center, if not more, to sanctuaries for the monkeys who are there. So there is open talk about this and open support for it. There isn't support throughout the research community, obviously, because there are animal experimenters who are fighting to keep their jobs, and they present a significant obstacle, especially at NIH. But we are working on it. We are making progress. We're obviously not going to stop until we end it all.
So we had a question here from a viewer who said, can you get an injunction to stop the breeding? But my understanding is the breeding is done, at least at that facility, right?
That's correct. The board of directors for the university has instructed the Primate Center to stop breeding during this period of negotiations until they figure things out.
Absolutely extraordinary. So, if people are just joining us, sometimes it takes a while for everybody to get the news. This happened so quickly. The huge breaking news is a colossal win. The Oregon National Primate Research Center, one of the most infamous monkey breeding facilities and lab experimentation places on the planet, has decided to end animal experiments, stop torturing monkeys, and turn themselves into a sanctuary. Honestly, when I heard this news, I was like, am I dreaming? Is this really happening? Because that would be something I would dream about. Oh, this horrible laboratory turning into a sanctuary. And now it turns out that this is the breaking news. I want to just go back to how big this is. PETA has been fighting for what? I've attended all your anniversary parties. Is it 45 years? Something like that. 40 years, 45 years. I mean, this has been your number one crusade. Your motto is animals are not ours to experiment on. How big a deal is this? Is this the biggest victory you've had in this arena?
Well, if we get it all the way to closure and transition to sanctuary, it sure will be. This is certainly one of the biggest breakthroughs we've had. And I think you're right in the sense that this signals, this is more than the Oregon Primate Center, as important as that is for those 5,000 monkeys. This is a message to all of the other universities that have monkey and other animal laboratories to pay attention, because you have one of the foremost research universities in the world that garners about $600 million in NIH research funds for all kinds of research, not just animal experimentation. And they're saying, look, we see the way the government is going, and we don't want to be left behind. We want to do what's right for science, and we want to do what's right for this university. And we also want to take care of these monkeys. So you're right, Jane, it's enormous. We haven't crossed the finish line yet, but we sure have opened the door, and we'll try to push everybody through.
And, there's a little bit of confusion, because it is a little confusing when you first read about it, because there's breeding and there's experimentation. So I just want to read what basically you sent out just a few minutes ago. Breaking news: OHSU to negotiate primate center transition to sanctuary, end of experiments. After hearing over the last year from legislators, PETAs, tens of thousands of Oregonians, Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, the Oregon Health and Science University Board of Directors has unanimously passed a resolution authorizing negotiations with the National Institutes of Health to end all experiments on monkeys. and transition to the federally funded Oregon National Primate Research Center into a sanctuary, a move that would mark a revolution in progressive science and animal welfare. I would like to know a little bit about who's going to run this sanctuary. On Unshade TV, we have some famous animal advocates who work with primates. This is not something that is easy to do. One thing is doing terrible things to them. And unfortunately, we only have to show you a tiny little bit of footage for you to get the idea of what terrible things. They're tattooed, they're stuck in horrible feces-ridden cages. And then when they're actually experimented on, they're often just put into like tubes. It's completely disgusting and revolting and unnecessary. Look at this. And yes, they're trying to open a monkey breeding facility in Bainbridge, Georgia, and I'm sure this will help the battle against that. But my question is, who would run this sanctuary and who's going to police it to make sure that, the inmates aren't in charge of the asylum, that the people who were previously torturing animals are now suddenly not in charge of pretending that they love animals?
Yes, I think all of that is what the negotiations with NIH will entail. NIH has been a big part of this because they have had discussions with the university about what they want to see. They have signaled very clearly they're moving away from funding experiments on monkeys. They've already withdrawn and eliminated some calls for funding or calls for applications for funding for animal experimentation. They're moving away from HIV experiments on monkeys, which is a huge part of what they do. So over the next 180 days, the university will begin those discussions with NIH. There will be input from animal rights groups, from sanctuaries, and these are accredited sanctuaries, and as well as from veterinarians and others at the university and elsewhere, and they'll put together this plan. I think one of the goals is to have this be a sanctuary that could possibly be accredited by the organization that does that. So it would have to be a real sanctuary, and it would have to be run with expertise and advice from those who know what they're doing in this area.
I'd just like to ask you a little bit about the global implications, because right now we are repeatedly and continuously covering the Animal Rising open rescue trial of beagles in the United Kingdom. You have about 18 people who are on trial. Some of them could spend up to 10 years in prison for rescuing some of the beagles you're looking at, 18 beagles in all. We just spoke to Rose Patterson, who's going on trial in a couple of days, about her upcoming trial. There's been one set of activists convicted, another set were acquitted, and a third set were convicted. But obviously, this is a global battle against animal experimentation. For example, in the United Kingdom, you have the longest running animal rights protest camp outside that beagle breeding facility that supplies the vivisection industry. Given this extraordinary news, what is the impact, do you think, on other countries? For example, England, which is in the throes of this massive trial where 18 activists are being basically, they face up to 10 years in prison for going inside this facility and rescuing beagles.
Isn't it an upside down world where you can be arrested for sparing an animal from misery and suffering? It's just crazy. But I do think there are worldwide implications here, because this is an unprecedented negotiation between the largest funder of research, all kinds of research in the entire world, and this major research university to come to an agreement about how they will phase out experiments on monkeys and take care of the monkeys they have. Everyone around the world is going to be paying attention to this. They have tried to gather support from monkey experimenters everywhere. And I think it's so important that these two organizations are doing this in spite of objection from animal experimenters. So to your point, I think the message around the world is something that can't be ignored. but we haven't had complete victory in all areas of experimentation yet, of course, and there's much work to be done, but it sends an awfully important message.
It does. And I know you're very busy, so I'm not going to keep you much longer, but I have to address a couple of questions that folks have. Mm-hmm. How about for the current experiments they plan on finishing instead of ceasing right away? Is there a way to get a cease and desist order, given that they've obviously admitted that these experiments are not effective, horribly cruel, a waste of taxpayer money? Why not stop the experiments immediately?
Well, that would be what we would like. We would certainly like to see it all end right now, but they're in the middle of NIH grants and the university would not agree to that. So for the time being, the experiments that are taking place right now will continue until they're done or until there's a final negotiation on transition.
That is a shame, but you know what? We have to take this victory. I got to tell you, as soon as I saw this, because just to go back for a couple of seconds, Kathy, you and I have been involved in the coverage of many of these cases. I will never forget. It was, I believe, 2009. I was in Puerto Rico for a journalistic conference when two lawyers ran up to me and said, they've built a giant, massive monkey breeding facility in a little place called Guayama here in Puerto Rico. We don't think we can stop it. They already built it. And I said, never accept defeat before you've started to fight. Let's get PETA involved in this. PETA was extraordinary, took it all the way up to the Puerto Rican Supreme Court, determined that they had built this prematurely without the proper permits, and it wasn't allowed to open. Similar experience in Hendry County, Florida, where I was involved in a whole drama and controversy over some guy who came into town, a carpetbagger, and decided he was going to turn Hendry County, Florida into the biofarming capital of the world, which means like giant, massive laboratory breeding facilities. PETA did an undercover investigation. There was a huge scandal about the whole thing, and you managed to stop it. So you have fought this. Now you're fighting it in Bainbridge, Georgia. I mean, you have fought this personally for years. And I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. I think this is the biggest victory that you've seen. It's monumental.
It is. It's monumental. There's no question about that. And I think part of the reason is that it's so monumental is that we're talking about 5,000 monkeys in this laboratory. When Harvard shut down its primate research center in 2015, far fewer monkeys, still obviously very important for those monkeys, but there was no sanctuary for those monkeys. They went to other laboratories. So this is huge. It's enormous. And when we talk about some of the things we've prevented, those were great because they prevented, for example, in Texas, 20,000 monkeys in one place, and all of the monkeys who would have come after those 20,000. But there's something especially satisfying to think about 5,000 monkeys who may, for the first time in their entire lives, have some chance, some semblance of a decent life ahead of them.
Last question. I'll try to make it the last question. It's very hard when I'm talking to you because I'm so excited about this subject and all your victories. And as one of our commenters said, this is why we support PETA and give PETA our money, because PETA gets it done. But what about the 6 other? I mean, how many monkeys are we talking about total that are continuing to be experimented on and bred at these other federally funded houses of horror, for lack of a better word? And what's your plan to go after them?
Well, this is an important first domino, as I like to think of it. The other 6 primate centers have fewer monkeys. They're probably among them all, perhaps about 10 to 12,000 or so. Perhaps a few more than that. It's hard to know exactly without having a census of each place, but they have perhaps somewhere between 1,500 and 3,000 monkeys at each of them. And they're watching very carefully too. They put up a fight against this. They really did a lot of lobbying to try to stop it because they see the handwriting on the wall. And we have seen one of those primate research centers already change its name to take the word primate out, as though we're going to be fooled by that. But I think, again, the government is making it clear that, we have a government for the first time, an NIH for the first time, and an HHS who are willing to look at other ideas for things and are willing to acknowledge the evidence that experiments on animals simply aren't working. The public doesn't want them, and there are other ways to do it, and they're going to see the handwriting on the wall.
Well, I want to thank you so much for joining us for an exclusive live interview regarding this fantastic and extraordinary breaking news. A colossal win. The Oregon National Primate Research Center is going to negotiate the end of experiments on animals and become a sanctuary for primates after an intense PETA campaign. From the little I know about life, I am going to predict that this is the beginning of the end for animal experimentation, because once the dam breaks and once you have this kind of a massive transition by the people who would normally fight it to the last breath, it really sends a message to everyone. I'm sure there are many examples in history where when that threshold is closed, when that threshold is crossed, when the genie gets out of the bottle, you can't put it back. And I really feel this is a moment in history. I hope you all share out this video and support PETA for their incredible work. Congratulations all around. And I know that you don't stop, Kathy Guillermo, no matter what happens, no matter how many victories, you are relentless. You continue on. So everybody, stay on top of this news, support PETA. I will say one last thing. No matter what I'm doing, and I'm very, 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 very busy, basically running an entire network from my couch. And there it is behind me on the TV screen. When I get a text from PETA, I stop whatever I'm doing. Ditto for email, because I know that within 30 seconds, boom, 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 I can effectively send dozens of messages to all sorts of thought leaders and people in government and people in corporations. So they're a machine, and they're a very effective machine. I urge everyone to support them. Let's end the hideous medieval backward practice of animal experimentation now. We are in the age of AI. We are in the age of quantum mechanics. This is beyond outdated. It needs to go into the dustbin of history. Let's do it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jane. Appreciate it.
So it's a vegan Netflix. Okay, that's the craziest thing I've ever heard.
I love Unchained TV.
Unchained TV. Your life will change. It's just that easy.
Unchained TV has all sorts of content for everybody.
Unchained TV changed my life.
Unchained TV is crushing it.
I love Unchained TV. Unchained TV is my go-to.
Unchained TV. Who knew?
Unchained, baby. Yay!